Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for a very important webinar, How to Get into Ivy League and Highly Selective Colleges in Today's Turbulent Times. My name is Elizabeth Aloni. I'm with Schneps Media. We're the largest local media company in the New York metro area, with over 100 publications from Manhattan to Montauk, Philadelphia, and Palm Beach, Florida. And today we're thrilled to have an expert who can lead us through this challenging or what can be challenging waters. So let me introduce you to Andy Lockwood. He is a best-selling author, college admissions and financial aid expert, and the co-founder of Lockwood College Prep in Glen Head, New York. He and his wife, Pearl Chisner Lockwood, created a different backwards approach to help select families get into top colleges at wholesale prices that can help launch their students for success post-college. Welcome, Andy.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just get to the burning, want to get into the inside scoop. But first, how did you get into the college consulting field?
Yeah. Well, it's almost like it found me, and I'll keep this short because this is the least interesting part of the presentation. But I went to college and law school. I racked up more than six figures worth of debt, whereas I had other kids that I met in undergrad who were from similar types of families who weren't particularly affluent, but somehow they were able to afford all sorts of, really nice stuff like cars and clothes and all that. And I knew there had to be a better way. There had to be, a system somehow, but I didn't really think like that. I just knew that I was doing it wrong. And then fast forward when I was practicing law, I had clients who were, very successful, and I knew that they had somehow figured out how to how to game the system themselves legally and ethically. And that's when I started thinking, okay, my dream was always to be self-employed. And I took what I learned from them and that approach, and then I came up with what I thought was a potentially winning system to be able to help not only pay for college, but also get in to dream colleges, getting into Ivy and other highly selective schools and winning tens and thousands of scholarships. And then ultimately around 2000, toward the beginning of 2001, I went out on my own and tried to make my dream of being a self-employed businessman come true, and really haven't looked back since.
That's incredible. And you've touched a
Yeah.
lot of lives, and it's not just about getting into college. You give people a full rounded, we're going to learn so much about it. I love what you do. But, I think the first thing that's on everyone's mind that makes people crazy is college is just so ridiculously expensive. So, I mean, is there any hope for the average Long Island family?
Well, the what a lot of people don't really understand about financial aid is that it's not just for super low income families. Most of the families that receive aid tend to be from the top 25% of income earners, nationally. So there's a lot of money being given to families who, maybe on paper make, six-figure or even seven-figure incomes. And the average tuition discount at a private college nationally average is 56.1% or 56.2%. So there's a lot of discounting going on. You certainly have to pay tuition, but you don't have to leave a tip.
I love that. I love that. You have a totally different mindset that I think really is beneficial for people to think about, that just because you're affluent doesn't mean that you can't save money on college. So
Now, just to round that out, colleges have a business model. They would love to be able to give every low-income family every last dollar that they feel that they deserve, but they can't do that. So instead, what they also need to do is to attract, again, six-figure and even seven-figure earning families and give them a scholarship, which number one, the kids deserve. Number two, gives them bragging rights. Number three, gives the parents bragging rights, right? But allows the college to, it charges $95,000. They can give a $30,000 scholarship and collect the other, 60,000 and change. That's the business model.
that's interesting. You have to think about it as a business. So how does financial aid and scholarships work?
Well, there's really a few different ways to get money for college. So there's the need-based system, which is predicated on filling out the financial aid applications. The two main ones are the FAFSA, the federal form, free application for federal student aid, and the CSS profile, which a lot of the more expensive private colleges use. I think it's about 400 colleges use in addition to the FAFSA. And it's not so straightforward. You know, the profile is like 200 or 300 questions. It depends. And the FAFSA is relatively straightforward, but the rules and regulations are pretty complicated. There's something like 1,100 pages of regulations behind the easy form, the FAFSA. So what you need to understand about getting money that way is that some types of savings penalize you more than others. So there are legal and ethical loopholes in the financial aid rules right there, but they're just buried, so no one knows about these. Most accountants don't know this. Guidance counselors are not trained for this. So sometimes what you have to realize is it's not how much money you have saved, but where you have saved it. And so money saved in your child's name is the worst place, even though your broker or financial advisor might have recommended you open up a trust account or a 529 or something, you will get penalized for that money. It's good to have savings, except it penalizes you. Whereas if you put it in one of the exempt accounts that are right there in the rules, like an annuity or a life insurance policy or something, then you would be exempt and you wouldn't be penalized for having that money. So that's need based. The second form is merit based, and merit basically means anything that's not need based. So so typically it's for people with good GPAs relative to the other kids that they're competing with, but also high scores, high SAT or ACT scores, again relative to who they're competing with. Now here's the thing. A lot of schools are test optional, meaning you don't have to submit your scores to apply. But applying test optional is a lot different than getting in test optional, and it's a lot different than getting funds, getting merit funding test optional. So you might apply test optional and get in test optional, but you might find that you're out of the running for scholarships because that was a requirement also. So it's very important to have to get your SAT or your ACT as high as possible. If you're not going to qualify for need-based aid and you're going for merit-based aid, that's even better, by the way, because there's more of that available than need-based aid. But a lot of figuring out whether you're going to qualify for merit aid is based on, again, your credentials, how you stack up, and which schools you apply to. Some schools are a lot more generous than others. And I don't want to ramble too much here, but the third way to get money, and this is a specialty of ours, is for high income business owners. There are 153 provisions in the tax code, and I'm saying this as a recovering attorney, not as an accountant. But for any given business owner, there might be 5 or 6 that pertain particularly to him or to her. But those provisions in the tax code allow you to use business funds to pay for college and take the deduction. There's something called Section 137 plan. And then there's other types of provisions in there that allow you to do things with pre-tax dollars or shelter your income in certain ways. So we have a really niche type of specialty in helping high-income business owners also free up money through what we call tax scholarships. Ways to free up money from their own businesses. So need-based aid, merit-based aid, and tax scholarships for high-income business owners.
I have to say, Andrew, every time I talk to you, my chin hits the ground because you uncover things that I've never heard of before. In talking to mother, having a son that's embarking on all of this,
Yeah.
I've never hear any of this. So this is amazing stuff. So now let's talk about getting into college because you're paying for it, but it just things seem so arbitrary um and scary. So what does it take to get into a top college today?
Yeah, I mean this could be something we spend a lot of time on. I'm actually curious. Can we ask people just to put in the chat like what year their kids are? Freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior.
Sure.
That'll just and then just let me know what they say. So if you can put that in the chat, whether you have a 10th grader, 11th grader, ninth grader, that'll
I have freshman, junior,
okay,
I say sophomore,
okay,
they're junior,
okay,
freshman,
okay.
sophomore, junior.
So a little bit of everything, but certainly a lot of
Yep.
juniors. Yeah. Okay. So just keep an eye on it if you and then let me know
Yeah, I'll
in
keep
the middle.
a
Yeah.
senior and a freshman.
Okay. All right. Good. Um, so so part of the quote unquote problem with college admissions is that people don't really understand what it takes to get in. So you might have a bright kid who does well at their high school and think, okay, Princeton, safety school, but you don't have the big picture of everyone who's competing and what the colleges are looking for. And what colleges are looking for is a combination of things that are in your control as a student and stuff that's completely out of your control as a student. So the things that are in your control, and this is roughly 60% of the equation, your GPA, your
Mhm.
SAT or ACT scores, because again, admissions officers would prefer to see those because they're helpful, not for any other reason. Um, and rigor. So this is a concept I talk about a lot with my students when I'm working with them one-on-one, because frequently guidance counselors, like this time of year, kids in 11th grade and 10th grade and younger are setting their schedules for next year. So they're having conversations with their guidance counselors, and frequently the conversation will end up along the lines of, well, you don't really need to take that extra AP class because your schedule is really hard, and I don't want you. It's well-intentioned advice from the guidance counselor, but it may not be a right for everyone. So I had that conversation about 3 hours ago, earlier with one of my students, and I said, well, before you decide whether to take that extra AP or not, tell me what colleges you're currently interested in, or what types of colleges you're currently interested in. And she, in her case, rightfully rattled off a bunch of, Ivy and super competitive schools. And I said, okay, so you need to take that extra AP class because the people you're competing with are doing the same. And if you don't take the extra AP class, the way your guidance counselor is encouraging you, it's almost like you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back to get into these schools. So if you weren't gunning for those types of colleges, then it would be a different answer. So so rigor. If people are taking notes, I really want them to take notes here. And if your guidance counselor says don't take the extra AP, that may not be the right advice. Okay.
But
So
that's also a nice perk by having you, Andy, because I got to tell you, my son listened to it a lot more when you said it than I
yeah,
said
right.
it.
Well, it's funny. I think I said this to you a couple times. I mean, I don't know how long ago this was, but same thing with my kids, right? I've got four kids. I've got three in college right now,
Wow.
and to them, I was just dad. I wasn't like a guy who's written five books on college advising or whatever. So yeah, I just don't have the emotional baggage that you do. But
Right.
I will say the same thing. Like whatever you want me to say to them, just tell me. I'll
Yeah.
I'll be your puppet.
That's what you need. You need that. You need that.
Yeah, yeah. So rigor is really, really important, and it gets overlooked a lot because most high school valedictorians don't, they're not necessarily taking the hardest classes. Some are, some aren't, but um, a lot of stuff is based on GPA, not rigor. But in college admissions, they care about rigor. So that's about 60%, and then the other 40% is a combination of things that are out of your control, non-politically politically correct stuff. So I don't know if if you warn people that I'm not particularly politically correct. I'm not like Bill Maher.
Morning.
Okay, right,
Morning.
right, right. So um, uh, race, ethnicity, even after the Supreme Court decision about affirmative action not being allowed, colleges are still, looking to make sure their classes are diverse and trying to figure out how to get more diversity. So whether or not you think that's a good or a bad goal doesn't matter. That's just the way it is. So those things still count. So does where you go to high school. Like there are so one of my kids goes to Cornell, my youngest one, and 2 years ago, the college very proudly put out a message to all the parents that said along the lines of, look, we just did a study and we realized that 80% of our students come from a very tiny set of feeder high schools. A lot of the top private high schools and the Stuyvesant and top public high schools. Like that was a news flash. So where you go to high school is also one of the things that gets factored in. And then the special categories is another thing that weighs very heavily on admissions officers. So anywhere from one half to two-thirds of college applicant spots are reserved for underrepresented minorities. Told you this wasn't politically correct.
Mhm.
Um,
We want the
International.
unvarnished truth. We want the unvarnished truth.
I'm just telling you my truth, and
Yeah.
you guys can decide whether or not it's true or not. But international students, although that's probably going to drop because of the current administration. Recruited athletes, that's a big one, and legacies, people whose parents went there, although that's slightly dropping off. And then there's other categories like children of professors at that college, etc. So here's the thing that may not sit well with people. Those special categories tend to have lower grades and lower scores. So if you are not one of those special categories, if you're just a plain old, white guy or plain old Asian American kid or whatever, and you're looking at any particular college, whether it's an Ivy or other top, 20, 25, 30 school that's out there, and you think, okay, I'm right in the middle of the median for SAT and GPA, I have a good shot. You really don't have a good shot because embedded in those statistics are the lower scores of those special categories. So you need to be well above in those metrics in order to have a fair shot of getting in. And people just don't understand that. That's why they're shocked when they don't get into schools they thought were safety schools because their guidance counselors at private high schools too. They rely on a software called Naviance or something called Score. Those are the two main ones that factor in your student versus everyone from your high school on the basis of GPA and SAT score. But the reality is, and this is why we use something different. We don't use those programs. Each of our kids is competing with people from all over the country, actually the world, but all over the country, and it's not GPA and SAT score only. It's about 25 factors, including the non-politically correct ones, including letters of recommendation and essays, and whether you're applying early decision or not, and a whole bunch of other stuff that can't be encapsulated by those two software programs, which again is why we use something different.
Mm, unbelievable. There's so much more to it than what you think. So knowing that there's so much more to it, what do you see are the biggest mistakes that parents make in the process of college planning?
Yeah, that could also be another night of discussion.
Are we that bad?
So yeah, how late do you want to go? Um, a big thing is not understanding the lay of the land, like how your kid stacks up compared to the competition, because you don't realize who the competition is, right? You know how we were joking before, like every dad thinks their kid's going pro in baseball or whatever, but that's a big one, and it's not their fault. But if this is confusing, it's not anyone's fault because you're not taught this in high school. Your guidance counselors aren't trained this way. So I just want to say that I don't want to make anyone feel guilty about this. I think another big mistake is not understanding that this process it's not a meritocracy. It's about marketing. It's about how you market yourself. So um, colleges are businesses, even though they're nonprofit and they get all kinds of grants and stuff. But the sad truth or the truth is that they look at our kids like products. So, if I were speaking to your son Jonah, and I may have even said this to him in our meeting, I would say, look, you're not applying to college. You're the marketer of Jonah applying to college.
Mm,
You need to think of yourself from a different perspective. Like, what does my audience really want, and how do I, what problem do they have, or what are their desires, and how do I serve it up to them? And the way you answer that question, and the real question, that is the right question, but the real question that's actually not on the common application, it's an invisible question, is why should we take you compared to these other 50,000 kids who look the same as you do on paper? So
yeah.
so the way you answer that question is through the totality of your application. There should be a thread of continuity that runs through all of your extracurriculars, all your academics, all of your recommendation letters, all of your essays, and everything else. And that's from ninth grade forward. So a big mistake that a lot of kids and parents fall prey to, and again, I think this is just part and parcel of the structure of high school, is they don't really focus on this stuff until 11th grade. Most high schools don't have their college meeting, or the counselors don't have that until sometime in 11th grade.
Yeah.
But by then, if you're just learning, oh, I should have taken three other APs by now, or done this extra, joined this club and gone for this officership or done this outside special project or whatever it is, then it's not that it's too late. It's just that ninth and 10th grade is in the books. So now
Mhm.
you've got less time. So we work with a lot of 11th graders and we're just, who just come to us for the first time who are, putting everything together and we're trying to help them optimize how they look so they stand out. But it's much better if you start earlier. If the kid is ready to start, that's a whole nother issue.
You know what I love that you say too is like when you're talking about helping a child market themselves. And to me, this is so important and something that you do that I love is that looking at your child's life as more than just 4 years of college. That what you do is you help people think about their life. Because I think about like I'm interviewing people for positions, I'm looking for interns. Marketing yourself is a skill that you need for your entire life. And if you can learn that at this stage, what a gift that is. So I think, what you do, what I love, I'm going to tout you for that, is that you help young people get straight with what's going to make them happy and what's going to bring them success throughout their entire life, not just those 4 years. Can you share a little about that? Because that to me is something
Yeah.
that is another key thing that differentiates you. I mean, obviously, like your tremendous experience with financial matters is unique. But to me, this, like from what you're saying about marketing, that really hits me about the importance of that long term for people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, there's a couple things to unpack from what you just said. So in terms of marketing, I tell kids very much what you said, very much in line with what you said. Th This process is about you learning how to deliver value to the admissions officers that you're trying to impress. But that's learning how to be persuasive and
Mhm.
learning how to advocate for themselves. But that's not it's not limited to a get into college skill. That's a life skill.
Mhm.
And I say, a lot of times to kids, I'm like, look, I personally do all this shameless self-promotional stuff. I've written a bunch of books. I get on TV every once in a while. I do webinars like this and uh, whatever I can do. And I'm not bragging, by the way, because who would give a what? But I'm eating my own cooking because the people who that I've noticed, the people who are the most successful in their lives, they're technically competent in whatever they are, whatever they do, doctor, lawyer, accountant. But if no one knows about them, then who cares, right? They're not going to be successful. So they've learned in their own way that's congruent with them how to be able to advocate for themselves and be persuasive and attract people, who find them to be valuable. So that's a life skill, which is really important. And what that ties into is what you were saying, which I was kind of being facetious with you the other day when I was talking about all these, and I'm sure people on this webinar have seen similar ads that I see online because I'm getting the same stuff as a parent, of three kids in college myself, that talk about how 93% of our students get into one of their top three choices. And I'm like, all right, I'm sure I could do 100% if I recommended Harvard, Yale, and Nassau Community College, right, or something. But anyway, or they have messages like that, and where I think they fall down. There's a huge gap that I would call a blinding flash of the obvious that occurred to me one day was that it's not just about getting into school because then what happens, right? I know, I'm sure a lot of people here tonight with us know so many people who went to elite colleges and then later in life just didn't become successful, or maybe some of them are flat out losers, not just financially, but maybe they're just hard to get along with, and because they think what doesn't stink and the world owes them something or whatever.
Or they're not happy,
Yeah,
or they're not happy with what they're
right.
doing.
Yeah, right. So it's just because you get into and I'm saying this by the way, my wife went to an Ivy League school. I went to a little Ivy. I grew up in a big public high school in Newton, Massachusetts, where 7 kids went to Harvard. In my own family, I've got one in an Ivy, one who got into an Ivy but decided not to go, and I've got 2 other kids who were at a state school and local private school. So I'm a living lab of everything I'm talking about as a college advisor. And where you go is not who you will be. So just getting into a school does not mean the rest of your life is going to be successful. And I think it's a real shame just to focus on those 4 years instead of the 40 years So what you were describing, what your son is going through with us right now, is the first part of our process, which is, I say words to the effect of, look, buddy, forget about college for 2 weeks. Instead, we're going to figure out things that could be a good fit for you, meaning how you're wired and what that could translate into in terms of places, plural places in the world where you could love what you do, so work doesn't feel like work. Because look, you do something that's great too. You help, people promote their businesses and help, help your readers.
Mhm.
I can tell you love what you do just from every time we've spoken over the years, and I feel lucky enough to feel the same way about what I do, and that's I think what we want for all of our kids, so they feel great about what they do. They can make a living, get off the mom and dad full ride scholarship, and work feels like play, and they can be happy. So that's the first idea. First step is to try to explore that. We have a career counselor, we have an assessment. He's going through that, and then back into the college list so that it's reputable across a couple of these majors and careers that we're able to narrow down because so many kids will go to college and they'll major in something, stupid like sociology or I usually say gender studies. I don't want to offend anyone, but and then they'll switch majors and switch again. They're on the 6 year plan at $95,000 extra per year, or
Mhm.
they somehow graduate and they come home and they're like, I can't get a job except rolling burritos or making coffee drinks that nobody can pronounce, and you've wasted 4 to 6 years of college and they feel really bad about themselves. So there's a lot of reasons um, to learn the right questions to ask about what you could get out of college. And in my view, I don't really care where kids go to college, which I know sounds weird coming from a college advisor, but what I care about is using college as a means to an end to help them launch themselves to be successful in their lives. And it doesn't mean you have to go to Yale or Princeton.
Mhm. That's a really good thing. What other mistakes do people make? I mean, obviously this is, about thinking about the long game, but what about financial? I mean, I think one of the things that you talk about too is like, about how people may rule themselves out because they're making too much money,
Yeah.
knowing that that's not the case, with what you shared earlier. Uh,
Yeah.
and what are some of the surprising things that families learn?
I just skimmed an email right before we went live here tonight from a family. They live in Jersey actually, and they didn't get any financial aid at all because on paper they look like they make a good living.
Hmm.
And I said, listen, I think we should appeal. I think we should try to negotiate with your school. So a lot of people don't realize you can even do that. So
That was shocking the first time. Did everyone hear that? You could negotiate with a school? I couldn't believe that.
yeah, in this case, I, the best time to win in a negotiation with a college is probably a year before you apply. It's nice to have offers from other competitor schools that you can use to play off against each other. But this family didn't have that. But what they did have was a story that didn't fit into the boxes of the financial aid applications. And briefly, although their business looked to be in good shape and they live in a nice house and drive nice cars and all the other trappings of affluence,
Mhm.
the business actually wasn't doing as well. They had personally lent the business a lot of money, et cetera. So we went to, in this case, it was Fordham University, and tried to explain all that, which you can do a little bit when you file the applications, but they always blow that off. So uh, so we had to do it again. They were very Fordham was very, I would say, relaxed about getting back to them. There was because this has been going on now for more than a month, but just apparently either today or last night, they received a revised offer instead of zero, they got $26,000, which Fordham's still very expensive, but if it's $26,000 over a year over 4 years, $100,000 for writing a little email, I'm okay with that. I think that's a good return on investment. So it does help to like I said, to first understand that you can negotiate this. Number two, to understand the um, the good arguments that could be persuasive in a negotiation. And one of those is things aren't what they seem. The way that's I just gave an example of that. Another is, um, in financially, if you have someone who graduates, let's say in 2026, what they're looking at are your tax returns from 2 years before in 2024. So if something in 2025 negative happened to your income, like you got laid off or downsized or your business, went south, the financial aid office wouldn't know about that. So you need to alert them, okay, we had a drop in income. And another potentially winning argument would be that we had unusually high expenses this year. So unusually high does not mean we live in Long Island, we pay a lot in property taxes. They know that. They see your application, they see your address, your zip code. What they're looking for is new information. So it could be something, usually really severe, like, um, we got divorced, we did, we're no longer sharing a house, and we had legal bills, or, business, bankruptcies, or things like that, or a natural disaster, ripped through our house. We had all these repairs, stuff like that. We had to take in older family members to support them, that type of thing. Um, so understanding that, first of all, you can actually appeal and get more money. That's a mistake that people just don't assume. And logically, colleges don't want you to know that. I mean, like any business, they're not going to say, "Hey, here's how you can pay us less," right? So
Right.
so that's definitely one of the top things that I think people just never really hear about, or know to ask for.
Look, I think this is a very, it's one of the hugest financial decisions that you're going to make as a parent, as your child may even make as an adult for the near future. Maybe the next thing that comes closer is a house. And I feel like trying to do this alone, it's you're kind of going through it with blinders on, that you would never, you just don't know what you don't know. So, I always want to know when I talk to people, what should somebody look for, when they're looking for a college advisor, and, who should get in touch with you? Who's the right, fit for someone to work with you?
Yeah, that's something I spent a lot of time thinking about, and I've learned the hard way over the years, right? So, I think if I were looking for outside help, I'd want to make sure that I wasn't getting the advice that I thought I needed from my current high school, which is usually the case. I think the reason we have a business is because most people feel like they're not getting they might have great college advising. They might be, we have a lot of kids in private high schools, and kids, go to these high schools because of the college track, but they're not getting that one-on-one private independent type of advice. So if you feel like you need an independent type of counselor who's not necessarily tied to the agenda of the school, or is going to favor one kid over another, or those types of things, that is a reason to look to work with us or any outside independent private advisor. I think the thing that's different about, there's two things about us that I think are different, which means they're not right for everyone. So I'm not here trying to solicit all, 100 and whatever people who signed up for this webinar. This is more of a public service type of thing, where I'm trying to get across how I think people should go through this process, but that doesn't mean I think that everyone's right for us, because I know that's not the case. So that was awkward, but I just wanted to read.
No, I think that's an important thing, that
Yeah,
look, having a college advisor, I think, is important. I think we all know schools are no matter how great a school is, they're overwhelmed. There's a lot of children. And if you want to get really good advice and you want to learn things that you would not be able to pick up, maybe if you read all your 5 books, but that you would necessarily pick up on your own, you want to have a college advisor. And you have a particular expertise that is right for some and not right for others. So,
yeah.
um,
Right. So another reason, and you alluded to this earlier, I just thought of this as you were saying that, is if you want to preserve that relationship with your son or your daughter through the most stressful time in their lives. Like
yeah.
I had another conversation today with a client up in Westchester, and the mom and the dad are both very highly educated, both uh, went to Ivy League grad schools, and very very successful, and the kids also very 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 sharp, and
Mhm.
um,
Sure.
and basically, I was, again, like you said, I was giving advice that the mom had given, but she was blowing off the mom because I wasn't mom, and she was listening
Right,
to me, and the mom was like, I just told her that like a week ago, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but you're mom, right?
right. Doesn't
So
happen.
so, but yeah, in terms of I think what based on our client feedback, what's different about us, which is only right for I think to be totally blunt, select families, is that again, we look at this process as being at the 40 years, not the 4 years. We do have kids every year who get into all the usual suspects, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. I had a kid who got into Wharton this year who I spent probably 6 months saying, "Look, buddy, if you don't get into Wharton, I don't know who they accept." And then he got deferred. I was like personally crushed. And then he got
Wow.
in, and his dad was like, "I know you were emotionally invested in this. I just want to let you know we really appreciate everything." And I was like, "Was it that obvious, right?" So, I have nothing against those schools at all, but I don't feel like that is number one, that they are right for everyone. Number two, that they're the be all and end all. So a lot of people, that's not the type of perspective they want. So I'm not right for them. So I look at this process as being about the long game, not about the short game. College is a means to an end to position kids to be successful in their lives, however that gets defined, and that's a process to help figure that out. And then the other thing, which I think we also touched on a little bit today, is that I look at this as a marketing process. And there's tens of thousands of other college advisors. There's several thousand right in the Schneps wheelhouse, media. But there are and plenty of them are going to be as competent as I am. I have no issue saying that there might be one or two who are better somehow, but that's hard for me to say. But I'm not being falsely modest. I recognize that. What I will say is that there probably aren't anyone that, and there may be a handful, but I haven't stumbled across very few who are better at marketing. Like again, the books, the webinars, the TV stuff. I do a lot of that stuff to shamelessly self promote. My point is that I'm eating my own cooking, and that's a skill that I try to help our students uh, learn about, and engage in, and help them, be successful, not just in the getting into college process, but their lives. So that is definitely a big difference in terms of the expertise in marketing. And then I think the third thing is that we combine a few different disciplines under one roof. So there's a lot of people who are college advisors because their kids went to college and they're like, oh, I think I should do this too. They're like moms who are, working part-time or something. And some of them are great, and some of them are not. But we look at this as a way to address the career counseling and majors counseling, because picking a major, number one, can help you get into a certain college if you major in something, but number two, just understanding what could be a good fit and what you should stay away from is also incredibly valuable in my opinion, so you don't embark on that 6 year plan. So that's a big part of it. Then the college advising stuff, which we've been talking about mostly tonight, and then helping pay, whether you're an affluent family that doesn't think they're going to qualify for a nickel of aid. We have many surprises. We have numerous kids over the years and every year who individually get more than $1 million in funding. When you look at their scholarships over 4 years, there's money out there for every type of family, even if they're not focused on that. We have a lot of clients who can just write the check, and they don't care. They're not looking for the money, but they don't want to overpay. They don't want to get ripped off. So we're very good at that, combining that with the other components. And we also do, SAT and ACT prep and a few of the other sort of usual suspect, type of services. But we try to holistically have a whole bunch of things under one roof. So it's like going to a doctor who's coordinating with your cardiologist and your rheumatologist and all these other, so everyone's kind of working together in a coherent fashion, in a very,
I always
very
feel like
stressful
that's
way.
the best way, that's always the best way to work. I mean, to be able to know, because all these things are interconnected. Like your essays and all of that, like you were saying, it should all have the same like thread through it, the same kind of thing in terms of your finances, like all of it is really a package. And, certainly I know before I met you, I was definitely wanting my son to go to a career counselor even before I knew that was part of what you
Oh,
do.
good for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I understand that, I don't care how much it is. It's a lot of money and it's a big commitment. And if they don't know at all what they want to do, not that I expect that, my 15-year-old or anyone's 15-year-old should know for sure what they want to do, but I think that
No,
there
they
are
can.
things that are inherently More yes and more no. I mean, I could tell you things about him from the time he was a little baby. So
Right.
like those things are not going to change. Those
That's
are
his
not going to
wiring.
change.
Right. That's how he's wired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like I'm not expecting because I feel like also there's a lot of pressure for these kids to know exactly what they're going to be forever. And that's not really the way it goes for most kids. But what
80% of
you're
change, sorry to
saying,
interrupt you. 80%
yeah.
of kids change majors. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's not abnormal for them not to know, but I think what you help with the wiring of saying, okay, these are the things that if nothing's going to change, those are going to be some of the things that you're going to be interested in. To me, that's really, really a critical piece to it. I have somebody here, Blessy, wanted to know, do you only accept high achieving students, like type A students?
Yeah. I mean, we certainly attract a lot of those and type A moms, I should say also.
What are you trying to say?
I would never say neurotic. I would just say, type A. Um, um, what the types of kids that we're good with are ones that are motivated. Um, they don't have to be gunning for Ivy League schools. In fact, I'd say no more than any given year, no more than 25-30% of our kids will be Ivy League caliber kids. And I had a client from a couple years ago who he came from a very high achieving family. Like his dad, they lived out in Oregon, Corvallis, Oregon. His dad was the head volleyball coach of the women's volleyball team, and he was also the head volleyball coach of the Australian women's volleyball team. And his mom was a super high achieving real estate entrepreneur, and his older sister, who I'd worked with, was kind of cut from that mold. And he was not. He really struggled in school. He got messed up with the wrong crowd. He got um sort of the usual, like, depression and drugs, and had to be hospitalized. And I worked with him for about 3 years. I signed up for like a year and a half with him, but it turned out to be a lot longer, because he needed much more of a you need someone to believe in him, and to tell him, no, you're not a loser. You're gonna figure it out. And because he heard that from his parents, but he was like, yeah, they're just my mom and dad. They're just saying this. And then, with me, he knew, okay, they hired me, but he knew that I was, kind of blunt and straightforward and all that. And in his case, he straightened himself out. He started getting success. He ended up going to a community college first and getting his associate's degree, and then matriculating to Arizona State University, which is certainly not an Ivy League school, but it was the right fit for him and the program that he wanted to pursue. And now he graduated, and he's making a good living. He's got a side hustle that I think is going to probably be his main thing pretty soon, because he's starting to do really well with that as a little entrepreneurial, guy. So it's definitely not. Uh, I only care about kids who are motivated and coachable. I don't really care if they're IB bound or whatever, because just like my own family, we have everything. We have the whole gamut. And I don't know necessarily that my Ivy League kid is going to be the most successful one. I don't think that's the case. I think, maybe my kid who had to struggle a little bit, who also went to community college, and then he went to a SUNY, and now he's finishing up at Hofstra. He might be very, very successful compared to the others.
I think it's a really good point. There's not one way to do this, and there's not one way that would fit working with you. Is there, you kind of go where the student goes, as long as they're willing to do the work and show up. You can guide them. And no matter what with the parents, you can guide them too, whether it's money's not an object, or you know um being able to get scholarships and things like that is important.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all part of the same, swirling mess that is happening right now out there. College is harder than ever to get into. It's more expensive than ever. Then you've got all this other political and economic stuff that's happening, and it's really, really stressful. And our job is to really make things less stressful, clarity as opposed to confusion, right? We're trying to help people gain confidence, and that it does not look the same for everyone. And frequently, you can make the argument that frequently getting into that dream Ivy League school may not be the best choice, because there's so many stories of kids who, two similar kids who want to be doctors, and one goes to the Ivy, one doesn't get in, they go to a regular school, and the one who goes to the Ivy ends up getting a C in organic chemistry, and they're happy because that was the first, even though that was the first C of their lives, they were happy because they thought they failed it. But then they realized in order for them to, to keep a high GPA, they've got to drop all those hard courses and pursue something else, which is probably a big reason why 50% of the kids at Ivy League schools go into consulting or something. But they gave up their dream of being a doctor, whereas the other kid doesn't have that failure, and they end up, going on to doing well, not just in organic chemistry, but to pursue their dream of being a doctor, right? So it's the long game. I keep saying that. I don't mean to, be a broken record here. It's not the 4 years. It's the 40 years.
No, I love that. Someone wants to know, do you work with kids who don't get into their preferred school and take a year off?
I've over the years we've had probably a couple dozen kids like that, and a big part of that when you reapply or you apply to new schools is you've got to be able to explain your growth. Like you have to do that in general on the common application when you're writing up your personal statement. You've got to show like a before and after or a story or a transformation or something like that. But it's probably more important when you are either transferring or you've taken a gap year to kind of account for what you've done in the ensuing time, in the intermediate period between when you initially applied and then after you finished up your gap year. So that to me is it's really the same
Mm,
as applying to college right out of high school, because they're basically looking at all the same materials, but they're expecting a little bit higher level of perhaps a higher level of self-reflection.
mm. Okay, that's great. But
Yeah.
there's still a way to market it. That's what you're talking about, right? It's not necessarily about what the kid did or didn't do completely, but it's about how you market that, right? There's no dead end,
Yeah.
I guess, is really, there's no, if you can market it right, there's not a wrong, I guess.
Well, no, you're right. I mean,
To some
so
degree.
yeah. So, and I don't want, I completely agree with you, and I've been talking about that the whole time. But I don't want people to think. I know there's a tendency for this, and I'm guilty of communicating in a way that leads people to kind of believe this. But there's a tendency to, like, check a box, check a box, check a box. Okay, officer of a club, started my own passion project. By the way, I hate that term because it's so overused. But it's not just about like checking boxes. It's about having a um, semi to actually coherent story that has this thread of continuity that explains the value that you potentially could bring to that campus community. And that doesn't mean that everything you've done is geared toward one thing. In fact, that would make a very boring applicant. Someone who's got interest in two or three different types of areas, who's gone deep in them, who's not just doing the same stuff that everyone else is doing. There's a big difference between typical and atypical students. So I had a couple clients who were twins. This is going back probably 7 or 8 years now, and they lived on the South Shore, and they were your typical sort of nerdy, robotic, STEMmy type kids, very shy, and their mom, of course, was the complete opposite, very effervescent and upbeat, and she was really struggling because they were good students, but there was nothing about them that was particularly standout compared to their peers, and they had some pretty high college aspirations. And so she came to me to in effect help them find their spark in some way for them to be I call them incomparable applicants, people that stand out.
Mm,
So ultimately what that looked like was they had an opportunity. The mom gives me all the credit for this, and I'm going to say right now, again, not being falsely humble, they're the ones who executed the idea. So I may have helped with coming up with the stuff, but they actually did the work, right? So they created a program for their middle school that fed into their high school, a robotics program to sort of act as a way to introduce robotics and act as a farm system to try to bring people up into the high school where they competed in the various robotic competitions. So they did that, and that was amazing. But then the school year was ending, and I said, "Well, what happens now? Like, what when they go home for the summer? What about the kids who want to, continue on?" And they kind of looked at each other like, "I don't know." So I said, "Well, why don't you offer, a summer program?" So to their credit, they created it out of thin air, and they actually got that written up in probably your paper, one of your papers, and then it was on one of the local Long Island news channels, and
Mhm.
we packaged that up, and when they sent the applications up, we sent that also, and we got the mom actually got a text from the admissions officer that said you should be really proud. Your applications really stood out in a really competitive year, and they got in to their top choice Ivy League school, and that was amazing. And then again, just to come full circle here, what I think is even more cool is that since then they've each graduated. One had a physics degree, one had a computer science degree, and they both got funded separately for separate startups by Y Combinator, which is this, I don't know if you know who they are, but they're a venture capitalist who funded DoorDash and all, you know, Airbnb and all companies that we've heard of. That
Yeah.
these kids got funded by that venture capitalist company. So very cool stuff, and we were, you know, we played a role in helping them do that, and it's very gratifying.
I mean, I think that's like really a great theme all around, really is about, the idea that it's not just about helping your kid get into a specific college that you have in your head or they have in their head, but it's about launching your child into a life that they will be happy and successful in.
Yeah, I think that's what we all want as parents, whether or not we're focused on that. I think that's really what we want, because if you force your kid to do something they don't want to do or whatever, chances are it's not going to work out. It's not going to end well.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. So
Yeah.
tell us some of the goodies you're going to offer our attendees.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm I don't know exactly how many people showed up, but I know how many people signed up. So I am happy, of course, to chat with anyone who has any questions. It's I probably can't do this for more than 10 or 12 people. I have a special page set up just for people who attended this webinar. It's getcollegeplan.com. I know it's not
I've shared it on the chat. I'm sharing.
okay. Yeah, I know it's not necessarily the most poetic website change, but it's
Straight
memorable.
to the
So
point.
yeah. So normally when we do like a full, initial comprehensive meeting and analysis, we charge $749. So this is waived for anyone who, as a thank you for letting me do this presentation here for your readers and your community. I'll say 12 people before we have to start charging again. You just need to book it in the next 24 hours, preferably. I know there's a lot of people who will be watching this on replay too, so this offer is open to them. Also, we're gonna email everyone out tomorrow the replay and that link if they have any questions. But if you want to know how your child stacks up, what their chances are realistically of getting in. What we'll talk about on the it's called the college strategy session is your kids' grades, any scores if you know them, the types of colleges that they're looking for, whether you're positioned to receive any type of need-based aid or what you can do to get merit-based aid, sort of generally. If you're interested, in that call, we assume that also means you're interested in exploring working with us, so we can certainly talk about the programs and the costs and the time investment that's also required, especially in today's world where kids are so overscheduled. That's a constant theme that we've been coping with for over a decade. So if you have any of those questions, particularly, do we have a shot at getting in at the schools we're looking at? What can we do to improve our odds of admission? And how do we stack up in terms of, are we paying full price whether we like it or not, or is there something we can do to cut the price of college down to something that's almost reasonable?
Right, right. That's terrific. Well, thank you for offering that. So I put that in the chat. There's also an email going to go out tomorrow. It'll be in that email as well. I know Andy will reach out. So take advantage of it. Do it quickly. Take
And let me.
advantage. Trust
By the way,
me.
I'll give my. Oh, sorry. I'll give my phone number too,
I'll
and
put out here
just
too.
if people want to contact us that way, it's 24/7. It's not, you're not going to talk to someone. You'll just leave a message. It's 516-882-5464.
Got it.
Yeah,
Right there in the
I
chat.
was going to ask you because I there's no way I can do that.
You're
And
fast.
our firm email address is VIP at lockwoodcollegeprep.com. And
I'm gonna
just
put that
and
in there.
yeah, VIP at lockwoodcollegeprep.com. And just mention that you saw me on the webinar, and my assistant will know that means to waive the initial fee.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. I had enough time to pull my chin off the floor, but I love this information because I really think it's eye-opening and it makes you think about helping your child in a very different way and a really important way to make sure they live a happy life, not just focused on what school they're going to get into. And love the creative financial advice because we all need it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your
Yeah.
time, giving us your time tonight.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this stuff. It's my pleasure. It's always nice talking to you, both, online and offline.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's funny. Like even I mentioned this a couple times. Even for people who can write the check for college, many times over, and it's not a money decision. It's really fun when the scholarship offers start rolling in, and it's you kind of forget that. I mean, I always think about a client I had from a couple years ago, who Fortune 500 fastest growing companies, one of these hyper alpha male, type of guy. And I said, I think your daughter is gonna be able to qualify for a fair amount of scholarships. And he was like, Lockwood, I don't care about that. One of the reasons I work so hard is so I can give Taylor everything that she deserves. I'm like, all right, that's cool. And then, like 3 or 4 months later, he starts blowing up my phone. He's like, "Oh, she got 30 grand from Syracuse." I'm like, yeah, I told you, Gene, this, it is about the money, right? So there's, if you take nothing else away from this, um, getting to college is hard, but the dream schools that are going to help your child be successful in life, those are the right schools to be focusing on. And you don't have to pay full price. There's a lot of discounting. Paying full price is a choice, not an obligation.
I love it. That is a perfect way to end. Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you to all of our attendees. We loved having you here. Like I said, you'll get an email tomorrow with all of this contact info, but maybe don't wait till tomorrow because he only has 12 spots. But certainly very valuable time. Thank you for all being here and look forward to seeing you all on a future webinar. Thanks so much, Andy. Good night, everybody.
Bye bye.